If you're gonna spend months writing content on a blog, not knowing exactly how it's gonna perform, you wanna make sure you're writing the right kind of content. So in this video, I wanna walk you through the different content types and how much of those different types you're probably gonna want on your blog. The principle at play here is what we call the content mix. The content mix is essentially what mix and what percentage of different types of content do we want on our blogs to help ensure its success the fastest as well as the longest for the longest term. So today, let's talk about the content mix, the different types of posts we write, and how much of each type you should be writing. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you've probably heard of the response post. That's the first one we're gonna dive into. The response post is essentially just a blog post where we're taking an entire article to answer one search query on Google. Now you may be thinking, there are a lot of questions people type into Google that can easily be answered with a yes or a no. So here's a good way to think about that. If it's the type of answer that Google could give using publicly available data, for example, what is the temperature right now in Boise, Idaho? Well, Google has access to that data and can easily provide that answer, and there's no nuance to it. However, there are a lot of questions where there's an answer you want to provide, and it may be the most accepted answer, but it's not totally definitive. It's not widely available in publicly available data, such as the weather, and it's something where there's just a little bit more meat, some criteria for giving the answer, or something along those lines. For example, a search query like, how much money do professional trumpet players earn? If the answer to the question is going to be, it depends, it's probably a good topic for a response post. A response post is typically about 1,000 words or longer. We rarely write a blog post that's going to be less than 1,000 words. The reason is we find that if we shoot for less than that, usually what ends up happening is we just don't get as much depth in the topic. So let's go back to that example. How much money do professional trumpet players earn? Well, the answer is obviously it depends. And it depends on a lot of things. So we can talk about the education and the background that they have. And so trumpet players who earn an advanced degree from a top school have a tendency to earn more. We can talk about the different types of work that professional trumpet players earn. Are they doing little gigs here and there? Are they in a little local jazz band? Or are we talking about somebody who plays in a professional orchestra? You can see that there are a lot of nuances to the answer of this question, which give the answer a fairly wide range. And so 1,000 words is really a bare minimum to answer this type of question. These blog posts are always going to contain at least one answer target. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say answer target, I've got another video that I need you to watch. But basically an answer target, in short, is something that we write in a short, succinct way, answering a specific question that's written in a way that it is likely to be able to win a Google snippet, to be featured at the very top of the SERP. A response post is the perfect type of post for an answer target because usually there is a straightforward answer that's at least the basic answer. For example, how much money do trumpet players earn? It could be something like, trumpet players earn on average between $20,000 and $45,000 per year. The amount they earn depends a lot on the type of work they do, the groups that they play in, as well as the amount of experience and education that they have. That would be a pretty good answer target for that particular search query. Now, the reason I say at least one answer target is that there are a lot of times where you can have additional answer targets under each of the subheadings, answering a very closely related question. Or sometimes there's a nice paragraph form version of the answer, but there's also a nice list form version of the answer, in which case we would want to create both and put them both in the blog post to determine whether or not Google prefers a paragraph or a list as their snippet. Response posts are going to have at least 3 subheadings. The subheadings are essentially sections of the blog post that are going to cover some aspect of the topic. So back to the trumpet player example, one of the subheadings could be the types of groups that trumpet players play in, or the types of jobs that trumpet players typically have, the years of experience playing in professional groups. And if you had some data, you could show that people that are, maybe fresh out of school, in their first 10 years typically earn in this range. But usually by the next 10 years, those who continue on are typically earning more in this range. You can see how for a lot of different search queries, it'd be easy to come up with at least 3. Sometimes we'll find that it makes sense to put in 4 or 5. If that's the case, don't hold yourself back at the 1,000 words. How long should a blog post be? As long as it takes to create a thorough resource for the user that's actually doing that search query. So how much of your content should be response posts? The answer is, it depends. I'm just kidding. It is true that it does depend, but that's a horrible answer to ever give in a blog post. Start off by giving a definitive answer, even if that definitive answer is a range. Anyway, back to this point, at least 10 blog posts, but potentially 80+% of your blog could be response posts. When you first start a brand new website, you have no history, no authority. There's no reason Google should rank any of your content. But response posts tend to be the type of post with the least competition. And so what we'll do is we'll write those articles answering those specific search queries that are most underserved. And in doing so, we're going to rank quickly, get at least some traffic over to our website, but more importantly, build some authority with Google. Now, there are some niches where there are just response post topics ripe for the taking everywhere. However, as you find those, I wouldn't limit yourself to the 1,000 words, and I wouldn't limit yourself to the answer target plus 3 subheadings format. You're going to want to potentially start involving some of the other formats that we use for staple posts, and those response posts often will end up becoming more like staple posts. But still, when we find that the competition is low, and we find that it's a pretty specific one-question search query, a response post is usually perfectly acceptable and more than enough to at least get the ranking. Okay, next I'm going to jump to the other end of the spectrum. The pillar post is a type of blog post that we used to teach about quite a bit in Project 24, and we used to talk a little bit about on this channel. The pillar post was essentially that really big, meaty piece of content, typically 3,000 or 3,500 words, sometimes even more. The pillar post no longer exists because really the distinction between a pillar post and the other type of post we're about to talk about, the staple post, is essentially nothing but length. And so there's no reason to differentiate the two. So now let's talk about staple posts. So staple posts are called staple posts because like a staple, they really hold your blog together. No, that's actually not at all what it means. Staple posts are the bread and butter or the steak and potatoes if you're from Idaho. They're the main meat of the content. So here's what a staple post is. First, it's an article that's usually more like 2,000 words, but sometimes more. Again, sometimes it'll be a staple post that's more like pillar content, and it's going to merit substantially more words. The reason, though, that we don't differentiate so much about length is that we've really learned that length isn't what determines ranking. Length of a blog post often correlates well to how well blog posts rank, but only because longer blog posts have a tendency to go into more detail, to give more depth, more evidence within a blog post. And so longer posts often tend to be better resources for their readers. Nobody wants to sit around and read 4,000 words. However, if the information is there, they can scroll through the blog post and at least they can find it. But what we've determined is it doesn't always take length to make that happen. Sometimes in 2,000 to 3,000 words, you can convey the same amount of information that most bloggers are conveying in more like 4,000 words. We can do that by being more concise in our writing. We can do that by including data tables and lists when that makes sense, rather than filling out all sorts of information in a paragraph format. Sometimes we can use images and infographics, short video clips, to illustrate points that would take a lot of words to fill up. In the end, we end up with as good a resource or better, but often in more like 2,000 to 3,000 words. And sometimes one of these blog posts will come in at 1,800. That's okay. A blog post should be as long as it needs to be to accomplish the task. A staple post is typically going to have more like 3 or more answer targets. There may be a primary search query that really feeds the headline of the article, and that's what it's all based around. But typically these types of blog posts are going to answer multiple questions, as long as those multiple questions are all around the same topic. The cool thing is that with every single answer target we write, we're taking one more opportunity to try to win a Google snippet and jump to the top of the ranking page for whatever search query that answer target is written for. These articles are not always going to take the same format, so let's talk about subheadings. There's not necessarily a difference here in how many subheadings I'm going to have. On average, my staple posts are going to have more subheadings than a response post. But again, I'm going to have as many as it takes to be a good resource. The issue with staple posts is that they don't all take the same format. The response post is typically going to follow a very similar post recipe. A little introduction, a nice answer target with the main search query just being nailed from the very start. We're going to have at least 3 subheadings, maybe up to 5. And then we're just going to end the blog post. With a staple post, it could take many different forms. For example, you could have how-to or tutorial type blog posts, product review or product roundup type blog posts, which are just 2 different formats of product reviews. An interview style blog post where you actually do interview an industry expert, and the format of the blog post is essentially walking through different segments of the interview. You've got the long response post. The long response post is kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where there really is maybe one primary search query, but oftentimes there are tangential search queries as well. And essentially it's a topic that just merits more information, much more than just 1,000 words. These are just a few of the forms that a staple post can take. Really, there are even more ways that you could present your content. And you don't just have to stick to these. come up with your own. Whatever would be most helpful for whatever the topic is. Inside Project 24, in our blogging course, we actually have some specific examples and guidelines about how to write each of these types of staple posts as well as some others. So if you're a member, make sure you go check that out. So how much of your content should be staple posts? I'm just gonna say lots of posts. It used to be that we would say of your first 30 articles, 10 should be response posts, then we'll write 10 staple and 10 pillar posts. And that was a good format, again, because those response posts get you early traffic and early rankings. It often takes a lot longer for the meaty posts on the more competitive topics to be able to rank on a new site. Today, I would say that every website should contain quite a bit of information in one of these formats. If you're ever gonna highlight a specific product to do a review, particularly of a higher end product, you're gonna take more of this format. It's gonna be a longer post, it's gonna be much meatier, it's gonna answer multiple search queries, and it's gonna do a much better job of selling the product than a 1,000-word response post answering one specific search query. Likewise, pretty much any niche you can be in is gonna have some amount of content that's fairly competitive, but that's also gonna be kind of necessary for your website to have on it to be able to be a reasonably complete resource. And even if it's not gonna rank organically anytime soon because it's a newer site and you have very little authority, as we write response posts, as well as staple posts on less competitive topics, as we interlink to those really good resources that are just pillars or staples of that particular niche, we're going to get traffic there, and we're going to establish more authority in that niche simply by having that content, even if it doesn't rank at the top of Google. Long term, there's not one specific content mix. For example, when we built our dirt biking site a few years ago, we found that there were a lot of topics, lots and lots and lots of topics that we could cover and that we could win with just a response post. There was very little competition and so many questions that are being asked by enough people to bring a lot of traffic. On that website, we probably wrote 50, maybe 60, even 70% response posts. There are other topics where response posts are just never going to rank. The level of competition is high enough that every single blog post needs to have more in-depth information. You'll find that most sites on the web are gonna have a healthy balance of both. If you're gonna have a successful site, you need to identify what's gonna be a good mix for you. Now, knowing the different types of content and how to write them, and even being able to identify a pretty good mix of what's gonna work on your website isn't sufficient to succeed. The next thing that is key to do is to learn how to identify the right topics to write about. We've talked a lot today about search queries and how we write this content to rank for a specific search query or multiple search queries. But we have to learn how to identify the topics that are tied to search queries. That's what search analysis is all about. And then of course the next step is learning how to just write the high quality content, how to do original research, and how to incorporate that research into a really helpful, really useful blog post. That's what this channel is all about. At Income School, we're here to help you create the ultimate content, ultimate resources that are gonna drive the most traffic to your website, and which traffic is gonna be able to earn you a great income because the content that they got was so helpful for them. That's how we win, and that's how we win long term, no matter what any algorithm does. I hope you'll stick around in this channel. I hope you'll subscribe, ring the bell, do everything you need to do to make sure that you get notifications when our videos come out, because we're here to help you each and every day. We'll see you next time.